Welcome, everyone, to our first ever live pulp literature launch. I am your host for today, Jen Landels, aka J.M. Landels, and I am also launching my second novel, Alenia's Song Area. And we are also launching Pulp Literature issue 26, featuring Matthew Hughes, MFC Feely, Rena Piccolo, Michael Donahue, Mike Carson, Patty Jean Pangborn, and Christina Ogle, and some other authors as well who can't be here, and of course Mel Anestachio, who's a staple in every issue as well. So we have all those readers coming up for you today. I don't think I've missed anybody. But first off, I want to check in with Melissa Mary Duncan. So Melissa Mary Duncan was our first ever cover author. And we have up on the screen here the cover of issue 1, which featured the Beer Fairy. And then we had her back for issue 5 with that lovely Chinese lady in Fondly Remembered Tales, I think was, or Fondly Remembered Fairy Tales, I can't remember the name of that one. And then the Storyteller in issue 12. She also illustrated the cover for issue 21, Frost and Snow. And she's done the covers of both my novels, Alenia's Song Overture and Alenia's Song Area, and she has very kindly agreed to paint the cover of the third book, and I can't tell you how much I am looking forward to it. And here we are, looking over Melissa's shoulder as she paints in her studio. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on right there in your studio?
I'm working on a portrait of a character from traditional fairy tales in Central Europe, mostly Germanic states, a character called Mother Holly, also known as Percha. She's associated with Christmas time modernly, kind of a female counterpart to Krampus, but she has a very, very interesting history. And I think she's a much maligned character as she was remembered more and more modernly, because she goes right back to an early goddess, they think.
Of course she's maligned if she's an early goddess, so, that's what happens to them.
Doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
I can see her outline, and I can see some familiars over her shoulder there.
Yeah, these will be witches, she's also associated with, upon occasion, the eldest brother Grimm, Jacob, associated her with leading the wild hunt. So she's associated with witches, which is sometimes considered the wild hunt. Sometimes it's considered demons and fairies, depending on which story you're thinking about. So I'm painting in the background some of the witches or the members of the wild hunt, which she is associated with leading. It's interesting because she's very much a domestic goddess associated with childbirth. Apparently, she's also associated with taking care of the souls of children who die, traditionally, in the oldest tellings. Of course, as that became more modern, it became that she only took care of souls of children that were unbaptized who died. And then that took on uglier and uglier connotations as we worked our way through history and the stories were retold.
It sounds like she needs a novel written about her as well to go with that beautiful painting.
Yeah, she's a very interesting character. As I say, she's very much associated with domesticity, childbirth, child rearing, spinning, weaving. Some of the modern tales are really quite grisly, where she sneaks in over Christmas and cuts open the children's bellies with scissors. And then fills them with rocks and garbage and stitches them back up again to punish them if they're slovenly or lazy. I think she's a really interesting character with lots of layers.
That is a fascinating character. So we are going to check back in on Melissa several times throughout the show tonight, just to see how her progress is going. I think you're going to be amazed. She is a very quick painter. And it always amazes me watching her work. So if you're on the Discord channel, please take a look around. We have a whole bunch of items up on our silent auction. There are all sorts of book bundles to give away, well, not to give away, to be auctioned. We have a complete set of back issues. So if you're a completist and you want all 25 of our back issues, that is up in the silent auction. And we have an editorial critique, which is for 3,000 words of your work in progress or your short story. And we also have a little bit of a fun thing. We have a bit of doggerel custom written for you by one of our editors, Genevieve Wynand. So you may have noticed she wrote some doggerel for the to talk about the Magpie Poetry Contest, and we enjoyed that so much we thought we'd offer you the chance to have a loved one or yourself or something you want to satirize or something you want to praise put into a poem, so you can bid on that and have Jen write a custom poem for you. So you have here beside me this lovely raven drawn by Mel Anestachio, and that represents our Raven Short Story Contest. And we are lucky enough to have both the winner and the runner-up here reading with us today. This is the wonderful thing about virtual launches, is we can have people who are out of town show up at our launches. So our first reader today is MFC Feely. Welcome.
Hi.
And MFC won the runner-up with her story, Danamora Sewing Club, and it's a wonderful story, and it is just short enough that she can read the whole thing for you. So I'm just going to hand the mic over to you, and if you want to say a little bit about the story and how it came to be, and then give us a treat with this wonderful piece of flash fiction.
Sure, thank you. The story was inspired by a true story that happened a bit north of me. I live in New York, and there was a prison break in Dannemora that involved a sewing teacher who helped a murderer escape. And this is not really them. They actually are quite different people, but I was just curious about what would make a sewing teacher do that. And it began as a much longer story that eventually got like maybe 30 pages that got boiled down to less than 500 words. So here it is. It's Dannemora Sewing Class. She leans across him, adjusting the thread's tension. He drives his nose into her armpit. A million thoughts churn behind his slow smile. His eyes drop to her breasts and bounce back. He mouths the word, bobbin, his lips bouncing on the B. It is the first word he's said to her. Angie feels a tingle. His foot lifts from the pedal. She watches his hands, clean but discolored by years of labor, pinch a wrinkle under the presser foot and push it away. He traces a circle where the wrinkle was and prods the center. Angie sucks in her breath. He resumes his seam, the faintest twitch tugging the right corner of his mouth. Angie reminds herself what those hands have done, why he is in prison. She feels where his nose drove into her flesh as he smooths the coming seam. She brings her lips together in the B sound. Zippers are tricky. A zipper will keep him in line. He inhales her, a mix of sweat and deodorant with a slap of ivory soap. Is that ketchup? She eats her eggs with ketchup. A man with nothing but time, he could stay there all day. The weave of synthetic fibers and cotton imprints hatch marks on his nose. The seam beneath his fingers is a 2-lane road that won't lie flat. Cars would topple. Ralph pushes hard, straining the thread. He shuts his eyes. Does she shave? Or is this sleeve hiding a mass of curling hair? If he inhales hard enough, he could unwind one, pull it through the coarse weave until it streams up his nostril, embeds with his own hairs, and sticking to them, becomes his. But it would be too much. He'd never get close again. So he sucks like a preschooler, pulling snot into his head lest the teacher wipe his nose. He'd like this teacher to wipe, but that will come. He catches her eye and holds it. He'll wait a week to touch her, to look at her. Next time it will be her wrist. He can't think about that now. Ralph likes sewing, making roads, connections, French seams flat enough to skate on, zippers like the thinnest blade of a hacksaw. Your zipper must never show, she says. You know what else doesn't show? The little guy popping up from under the manhole, the bobbin holding everything together, that with one tug unravels it all. He's the whole machine. He's the difference between a woman sewing alone and two threads weaving a future. Ralph twitches his lip the way women like and mouths, bobbin. Angie stiffens. It's as good as a blush. It takes 9 months, but their zipper comes together, apart, together, apart, until it breeds the slimmest echo on the male side, a tiny hacksaw bulging like a beautiful baby bump, safe under his perfect French seam.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. I love that story. And it is delightful to hear you read it. It's so much better when it's read out loud. I just want to remind the audience that you can ask questions. So type them up in the Discord chat or on the YouTube channel, and somebody will pass them on to me. And then we'll have breaks throughout the show. So if you have questions for MFC or Melissa or any of our other authors, please send them in. Before I let you go, what are you working on right now?
Well, I'm quarantined like everyone else, so I'm actually rewriting an old novel. And ironically enough, the working title originally was Raven. So it's funny that I'm reading something from the Raven Prize. And I'm working on that. That'll keep me busy for a while. It's fairy tale related, so I like the illustrations of Mother. I always called her Mother Hull. But
That's great. I mean, it sounds like a good omen that you're working on something called Raven, or originally called Raven. So, thank you so much for reading that. And we're going to bring our next author onto the stage. So, Michael Donahue is local to Vancouver, and originally we would have had him reading on stage at the Cottage Bistro, but instead we're going to have him reading from his study or his living room or wherever he happens to be holed up. His story, Life for Sale, won this year's Raven contest, and it is an epistolary story, but probably one that you haven't read. It's not quite the typical, 18th century letters back and forth to each other. So this is an epistolary story with a twist. So Michael, I'll hand the mic over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's a super big honor to be here. I'm really, really pleased to be able to win the Raven and to share my story with you. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is called Life for Sale. It's set in the near future. Hey, I'm responding to your Craigslist ad in the Life for Sale section. White male, 31, good job and health, original owner, looking for fast trade. Male, average looking, good health, one bad knee, awesome job, no diseases, smoke free, no pets for children, looking to straight up life swap trademark for equivalent trade-in due to recent divorce. Original owner, never swapped before. My loss, your gain. Is it still available? Maya. Hi, still available, but not interested in selling to a woman, thanks. Hi again. Ha! Totally understand that feeling, but just to let you know, my original life body was male. Also, I've mostly traded and run male bodies, so no probs, providing continuity for your ox life. Friends, family, work, colleagues, etc. BTW, what's your awesome job? I'm looking for a straightforward life swap. Female, 27, mixed race, sold to me as being Japanese Norwegian, but I have my doubts. Curvy, moderate eczema, some Crohn's disease, steady employment in a flower shop 4 days a week. Comes with 2 pet rats and a large extended family, plus a hot girlfriend. Yes, you read that right. I'm enclosing a photo of GF Cynthia. Please let me know if you're interested. Maya. Hi, Maya. Hadn't considered going female before, but wow. Any other girlfriend pics? I'm a hotel inspector for Hyatt, so lots of free travel, food, and of course, accommodation. What state are you in? Me, Chicago. I'm looking for a new life somewhere very far from here, but unconcerned about the actual location. B. Hi, B. I'm in Riverside, which is on the outskirts of LA. Nice and sunny all year round. Not sure about Chicago. I grew up next door to you in Indiana. Remember how bitterly cold it can get if you don't dress for it. Weather is important to me. If you travel lots, can you move cities and keep your job? I'm really only considering lives in the southern part of the US or Hawaii. Does your life come with any religious entanglements? I'm enclosing 2 more Cynthia pics. Regards, Maya. Hi, Maya. Here's a spreadsheet showing the past 4 years' finances. Full disclosure, note the spousal support starting next year. Can you provide the same? Chicago gets cold, but you're right. I learned young that if you dress for it, you'd hardly notice. Hyatt's HQ is here, so job location is fixed, but I share a rare window office on the 44th floor. Terrific views. Along with the Surface 1 memories of friends, family, and routine, I'd like to leave you with all 15 years, levels 1 through 3 of my girlfriend wife. Of course, you never have to access them. I just need to leave them all behind. I'll include all level 1 and most of level 2 memories for work. Job quite easy. And we'll throw in a euphoric level 3 memory of me winning the state basketball championship as an incentive. If you agree to take my wife memories. I'm just looking for a fresh start. Send spreadsheet, health report, and more girlfriend pics, please. B. Hi, B. Nice. I'm a basketball fan myself. My original bio kids were big b-ball players, and your finances look good. Have enclosed mine as requested and a health report. Do you get much time off with your job, or do you wake up every morning in a near identical hotel room and struggle to remember what city you're in before rushing to your next flight in your next identical room? Do you have any time to explore the places that you visit? How does it work? Could you answer the religious question, please? I'm Wiccan right now, but more spiritual than religious. In a previous swap, though, I ended up in a severe evangelical setting. Not my thing. I grew up Presbyterian light. Also, can you enclose some older photos of you so I can see how you're aging? Here's a video of Cynthia and me on holiday in Mexico. All the best, Maya. Maya, sorry I missed the religious question. Presbyterian 2, also light. I can throw in level 1 memories if needed. Haven't gone regularly since childhood. Yeah, I grew up in Indiana as well, so I know the weather can be really tough on people. Nope, work trips don't allow time off between visits, but you have the flexibility in the planning. It's possible to schedule all the southern inspection trips for the winter. Would you be willing to include some level 2 and 3 memories on Cynthia if we trade, or does she already know you're planning to trade lives? She's a big attraction to your offer, so I wouldn't want to go only with level 1 and have her figure out in a month or 2. Also, I noticed in your health report, you're left-handed. That's really an undisclosed impediment and significantly reduces your value to the market. I'm offering a good package here. Even with the support payments, my income is 2.5 times yours. I should let you know I'm considering several other lives, but I want out of this one ASAP. So time is the biggest factor. I feel sick all the time and I just want the hurt to end. Can you commit to making a trade in the next 24 hours? I have savings of $50,000 in an offshore account that I plan to access after the life swap, but I'm willing to give you 15,000 of that as an incentive if we can complete within the next day. As requested, here's some photos of me 5 and 11 years ago. B. Dear Brad, I'm sorry things are so hard for you right now since you and Anne broke up. How many 31-year-old male basketball state champion Presbyterians from Indiana with names beginning with B can there be? But really, the old photos cinched it. I know I really don't have the right to offer you advice since I skipped out on you and your brother 15 years ago. But please don't make the same mistake I did. Life swapping right after your mother divorced me has been the biggest mistake of my contiguous life. I know now that I should have stuck around for you and your brother's sake. I regret that a lot. Since then, I've been constantly hopping from life to life at least twice a year, and it hasn't brought me any of the peace of mind I wanted. In fact, it's been the opposite. Life swap isn't the answer. Not a day has gone by when I haven't wondered about you and your brother Alan. I know how attractive a swap seems at a time like this, but don't be fooled. Don't believe the ads. It isn't a second chance. Wherever you go, even with a different body to a different city, with a different life, you're still the same person. What makes you happy now, what makes you sad, what you find funny, they always stay the same, no matter what age, sex, or race you become. I understand if you don't want to hear from me again, but I'd really welcome the chance to reconnect if you're open to that. Your dad, Maya. Yo, Maya, what up? So I'm just trolling old Brad's email and I found this gem, wicked. He didn't include this memory in our life swap, duh, but it looks like he forgot to empty his deleted email folder. What a noob. Anyway, so I don't know what to tell you. He didn't offer me any of his savings for our trade. That makes you feel any better, scumbag. You was a bit preachy, though. If you was my deadbeat dad, I wouldn't have replied either, TBH. Hold on, room service has arrived. Friggin' A. The job is awesome, but there is so much shit from my boss. Old Brad never told me how much of a stickler they is for detail. So this life is not as good as he promised. That's for sure. Anyway, he's an 18-year-old kid in Lebanon, Texas. Yeah, if you want to find him, I guess you could try my old gamer tag, noobkiller_69. Brad. And
Thank you, Michael. That is wonderful. I love the fact you do the voices too. You did a very good job of making it quite clear which character was talking. Not that the story doesn't do that perfectly well as well, but it's a great story with a great twist and well deserving of that prize.
thank you so much.
So I understand that in real life you are one of the few people that are still going to work every day. Do you want
Yes.
to tell us a little bit about what you do?
So I'm a UBC employee, but I'm embedded at the BC Centre for Disease Control. So I'm one of the few people probably that actually has significantly less time to write because the days are very long. And I used to have one day a week off where I would write, and now it's very busy. And I help coordinate research teams of physicians and scientists on what to do. And BC is incredibly fortunate in so many ways. We've done a fantastic job in bending the curve, and that's down to the people and the leadership and the sciences. We're very, very fortunate, but it's a long haul. It's going to be a marathon.
Well, we are really grateful for people like you who are still putting in long days and extra long days to help us get through all this. If you're not having time to write, are you planning, maybe a holiday when all this is over so you can just devote yourself to your keyboard?
Yeah, I feel like I've earned quite a bit of overtime at the end of this. Yeah. So I was working on a novel, and I'm hoping at some point to take a month or two off and just get back into it and wrap it up because I was fairly close and now I just feel it drifting away. But it, um, but it's work is incredibly rewarding. Gives me the warm fuzzies. Yeah, it's a huge privilege.
Yeah, well, like I said, we are all very grateful. And we're very grateful for you reading this story today to take our minds off it.
Thank you so much for having me here. I feel it's kind of like late night with Graham Norton. 'Cause you do it with like your friends and you can drink and
Well, that's right. This is the nice thing about these launches is that you can drink as much as you like and you don't have to drive home.
yeah.
We'll stick around, hang out in the Discord. If there's anybody there who wants to ask Mike more questions, please do. But we have another Mike to bring on stage right now, and another contest winner. So Mike Carson is a teacher from Kamloops, BC, and his story was one of the runners-up for the Surrey International Writers Contest. We publish those stories in the magazine every year. So his was one of the runners-up for last year's contest. I don't know if there will be a contest again this year. I don't know what the state of the Surrey conference will be, but hopefully it will continue. With that, I am going to hand the mic over to Mike with Deep Water.
Hi, and I hope you can hear me reasonably well. This is, as Michael before me said, this is a real honor to be able to share my work with you. I spend a lot of my day sitting in front of a computer screen now that we're on lockdown. Students have a lot of time to do extra work, so I have a lot of extra marking. Anyway, so this is a fairly long story, so I'm trying to keep it down to about 5 minutes or so. So I'm just going to read the introductory part. It's set in the near future. Hopefully, it kind of speaks to people a little bit as well. At least when you get to be my age, it has a lot of themes in it that I can certainly identify with it, and I think, or I hope a lot of people can as well. So without further ado, Deep Water. I could hear my father shouting as I passed the nurse's station. Room 1201A, portal to hell. I tried to pump a little iron into my spine as I pushed through the heavy faux wood door. Everything in the room was pretty much as it had been on my last visit, including the shouting. The same seasickness green walls, scuffed by the rubber bumpers of countless hospital beds. In the humid air, the smell of stale urine and industrial cleanser were duking it out. As usual, urine had the upper hand. The curtain was open on the old man's side of the room, his bed neatly made, a hospital cart on wheels rolled up to it. There was a small television mounted on a swivel arm, $10 extra per day for that little luxury, by the way. A small table, yellow flowers withering in a vase, an IV cart, and the usual hospital machinery that could make all variety of pings and beeps and buzzes, but could do nothing to bring back an old man's mind. I stepped around the curtain toward the little sitting area, a barred window with 2 rocking chairs overlooking a vista of flat rooftops and air conditioning units. In the distance, 2 scraggly palm trees clawed at the smoggy California skyline. The old man stood in front of the window, arms waving, obscenities pouring out of his mouth. His hospital gown was untied at the back, white ass cheeks protruding like 2 plastic bags filled with cottage cheese. Charlie Cahill. A bare, forked animal, an unaccommodated man, my old man. The brunt of his wrath was borne, as usual, by Rose Celestin, a young Haitian nurse with long, glistening hair twisted into tight cornrows. She was standing with her arms folded across her narrow chest, head tilted to one side. She looked fragile as a bird, but I'd seen her toss these old-timers around like they were bags of cotton candy. "Mr. Cahill," she said. "Why don't you go on and get yourself dressed?" She pointed at a pile of neatly folded clothes on the table beside her. "You'll need your medicine before dinner. They'll be missing you in the dining room. Who the hell are you? He said, pointing a bony finger. You're the bitch that's been stealing from me, ain't ya? He turned toward the door, saw me. Wally, he said, squinting. That's you, ain't it? Call the cops, Wally. They're stealing from me. Wally, his brother, killed over 50 years ago, back in '68, just outside Da Nang. The old man told me once what they shipped home of Wally could have been buried in a cereal box. No, Dad, I said. I'm Matt, your son, remember? His shoulders fell. He began to shake, and tears trickled out of the corners of his eyes. Liar, he said quietly. My son's dead. He turned, giving me a full view of everything he didn't have on, and then sat down in one of the rockers. He stared straight ahead, not moving, as if he could see to the end of the world. Or maybe it was only the palm trees. Bonsoir, Matthew, Rose said, putting a little French twist on my name so that it sounded a bit like a classy sneeze. Mathieu. Tough day? I said. She shrugged. I walked to the old man, put my hand on his shoulder. Hey, Dad, I said, gonna get dressed today? Fuck off, Wally, he said. He started to rock, still staring straight ahead. His shoulders were shaking. Who's wouldn't, I thought, if your dead brother's ghost kept dropping by to visit? Where the hell's Maria? He said. Maria, his wife, dead since 1980, 3 years after I was born. I knew her from pictures, in a single bright shard of memory, green and red lights framing the face of a smiling, dark-haired lady who held me in her arms, the smell of cigarettes and vanilla. Nothing more. She couldn't make it, I said. The old man stood up. When he turned to face me, his eyes were wide, frightened. Go get Maria, Wally. I need Maria. She'll know what to do. He put his hands to his head, squeezed. Something's wrong with me. He dropped his hands again, leaving a few tufts of white hair sticking straight up from the top of his head, like some demented prophet. He needs his meds, Rose said. Okay, I said. You take these pills and I'll bring Maria tomorrow. It made me feel like shit, lying to him. I told him about a dozen times that his wife was long dead, and each time he'd weep as though she died that day. My old man, crying. In all the years I'd known him, he rarely cracked a smile, never shed a tear, and now the wrong kind of jello at dinner could reduce him to mush. Rose and I managed to get the old man to swallow the pills. He was convinced they were poison, but he took them anyway. Maybe he was hoping for poison. I helped him into some clothes. He fought every step of the way. Dinner time, Rose said. Coming, Matthew? Would it make any difference? Of course it would, she said, turning to look straight in my face, in a manner I felt was a little accusatory, considering who was paying the bills around here. You'll be spending time with your papa. He thinks I'm a ghost. Ghosts and dinner don't mix. Ever read Macbeth? All right. And, hopefully, if you're on the fence about buying the latest issue, you can read the rest of it when you purchase it.
Thanks so much, Mike. That's great. And having had a father who went through long-term care and dementia, I totally feel that. But it's a really good story, and it goes deep. So you're a teacher, so are you working from home now, teaching online?
Yes, like I said, there's so many more assignments coming in now because the kids are at home, and so everything's done online. I spend a long time each day marking, but I'm so glad that we have this technology that we can actually use to still communicate with our students, but it's not ideal.
Yeah, you must have to exercise a lot of muscles that you're not used to using when you're teaching. When you have to, connect through technology and you don't get to see people face to face.
Well, you can imagine if you could mute your teacher. I mean,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine some of the bells and whistles you have to use to keep your students' attention when they're sitting at a computer and nobody's watching them.
Oh yeah, and I'm lucky. I teach high school. The younger kids, I think, feel like herding cats most of the time. I suspect
It must be. Given that you are still working, are you having much time to write?
I'm really trying, but it is, I spend so much time in front of the computer that, by the end of the day, you just feel like you can't. I've been trying to get up earlier in the morning to do a little bit of work, and then, go for a walk or run or something just to stretch myself out a little bit, and then come back and do the schoolwork. So I'm trying to make time every day. I think that's key, but it's slow. It's slow going. I think I said in the bio I've been working on the same book for the last decade or so. So it'll be great, I'm sure.
I'm sure it will be the great Canadian novel once it's done.
Exactly, that's it.
But I applaud you for making that little bit of time every day. I wish I did that.
It's easy to talk myself out of it, that's for sure.
I bet. Well, thanks, Mike. Hang around, head into the Discord and chat with people there if you like. Let's talk about these beautiful drawings that you've been seeing. So our in-house illustrator is Mel Anestachio, and she has been making our magazine beautiful for these last 26 issues. And you just see some of the depth of her ability here in these three different drawings. The center one there is a scene from the extra, which is her novel, and we've got that gorgeous raven with his feathers, and then very simple representation of a hospital room there, and yet you get that and you're there. So I just a little shout out to Mel there, and this is the nice thing in a public launch. It's the illustrations often get passed by, but when we're doing it online, we get to show them off. So, well, let's check in on Melissa, see how Melissa's getting on with her painting.
Hi guys, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Good. How's it going?
It's going fine. Can you see anything? Oh, you can't see my
Yeah,
phone.
those faces are coming in quite clear now.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's good. They are dressed in the historically appropriate clothing for purchase, which is another name for Mother Holly. It's a more southern name in the Germanic region. And people still dress up as Percha or Mother Holly and go around at Christmas time. She's traditionally associated with the 12 days of Christmas, Advent, and all of that as well, depending on where you are geographically. So right now I'm just basically, I started out with a loose pencil sketch, and then I'm actually defining that more and drawing with the paintbrushes as I go, sort of indicating the areas of light and dark to begin with in nicely neutral tones, so that I can then pull out the textures and colors later on top of it.
Oh yeah, I just love watching you work. I'm just peering at the screen here.
Oh,
watching it come to life right under your hands. I'm just going to read some of the comments that came through while the readings were going on, and a lot of people didn't reference what stories they were referring to, but this great story, that was excellent, great story, nice, that was a great read, great, and strong story, Mike. I guess that last one was addressed to Mike Carson.
oh, that's lovely.
And I have to agree, they are all excellent stories.
Yeah, I've always loved going to the launches. I love hearing the writers read. It's really interesting to hear them speak the story in their own voices. I always find that gives a lot of texture.
It sure does, and I always find it makes the story so much more real for me, because
Yeah,
I like reading stories that from authors I've met in person, because I can always hear their voices when I'm
yeah,
reading it, and then as soon as I've heard somebody read a story out loud, then I can forever hear that author's voice.
yeah, yeah. I can relate to that completely. Completely.
So while we're still experiencing technical difficulties here, I'm going to just talk a little bit about our silent auction items. So if you haven't been into the Discord channel on the silent auction yet, if you go into the Discord channel, any channel that says SA is one of the silent auction items. And we have a bunch of ones that are there to be bid on. The first one is the Elenia package, which you get both novels plus issue 25 of Pulp Literature, which contains a prequel story to the trilogy. The value of that is 78 plus shipping. Minimum bid is 25. And the next thing we have on our list, we have all 25 of our back issues. Value 395. Minimum bid is 50, so you could get all of those for $50. And I'm seeing signs of excitement from our director. And I just want to acknowledge Chris Richardson, who's doing a wonderful job directing. And I think we've got one of our authors on stage now. There's Rena! Hooray! We made it. We got you.
I'm really sorry about that.
No problem.
Technical difficulties.
So everybody, this is Rena Piccolo. If you can center right up on your screen so we can see you, because we have right now we have a panel on either side of your head.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
that's what I'm
just,
seeing too.
Yeah, so shift yourself over so you're right center. There we go. And we can see your beautiful face.
Thank you. I can't see anybody else's beautiful faces though.
Oh, well,
Only-
no, you're the star of this segment.
The pulp. Okay. Are we going to do this visual coordination here? The comic.
We will. Chris is just lining up everything. So I'll just introduce you. So Rena, she first appeared in Pulp Literature in issue 7 with a story called The Power of Centipedes, which was an illustrated story. You will never look at centipedes the same way again once you've read that story. And then we had her back in issue 17 with a story called The Vanishing Dot, which was much more surreal and whimsical and quite a lovely, gentle story. And another complete turn of tone in our most recent issue. She's given us Double Flush, which is quite a comic story that I think a lot of you will probably be able to relate to. So let's bring that comic page up, that first page up, and I'll let Rena take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Jennifer. So the title of the comic, it's a 4-page comic. It's called When a Double Flush is Necessary, and it's a true story, really happened. So in the first panel, I'll just begin reading. And by the way, I have to do sound effects, so I'm not sure exactly how to do the sound effect of a toilet flushing, but I'll try my best. Okay, so we begin. A guy walks into the ladies' room. The restroom is empty, except for a woman in the first stall. Hey, what's a man doing in here? Oh, he's gone now. It was just an employee. By the way, how did you know it was a man? Pardon? You're in the stall. How could you know that it was a guy that walked in? Well, years ago, I had 2 near-death experiences. You know how, like, when you wake up from a near-death experience, you have very powerful intuition? Yeah? Well, my near-death experiences left me with enhanced senses from being in contact with the afterlife. I've been blessed with the energy of the cosmic light, and the power has remained with me. There was a man in my life at the time, but holy shit, listen to this woman. I can't wait to tell everybody about this. I can't pee. I can't tell you how or why it happened to me, but because of my enlightened, come on, pee, why can't I pee? Shit, wait, if I pee now, it'll sound disrespectful to her near-death experiences. Maybe the reason I can't pee is because she's distracting me. And my boyfriend at the time had a child from an focus. Oh, pee, pee, pee. Drip, plip. Jesus, that's all? All that effort for 2 drops? Because, as you know, auras can transcend the physical. Yeah, I know. Another realm, I know. It's in the spirit realm where we... Shit, now I have to flush. I can't interrupt her spiritual message with a toilet flush. It's the ultimate insult. It's only 2 driplets. Maybe I'll just leave it. How savage of me. I can't not flush. And then my boyfriend dumped me. This seems like an appropriate point in the story. Flick. Flush the toilet. After the flush, she says, when the man walked in here, he had called out, so I did hear his voice. Pardon? He announced himself when he came in. That's how I knew it was a man. Oh. But even if I didn't hear his voice, I still would have known it was a guy because of my enhanced intuition. The flavor of his aura was enough to tell me. As you know, male auras are more aggressive than female. Schlish, and I toilet flush, the second toilet flush in the visual there. And the end panel is sometimes a double flush is necessary. Now I gotta pee.
I love that story, Rena. It's so funny.
Thank you so much. It was fun to read and fun to do, to work on. Yeah, it really happened. You can't make that stuff
Yeah,
up.
I believe you. And Christy says, love Rena's reading. And Brenda Carr says, lol, LOL, I'm killing myself here with laughter, LOL.
That's the best thing that's the best praise a cartoonist could get, is to hear that someone's laughing out loud.
Oh, we laughed out loud when we read it, and I laugh out loud every time I read it. So
Great.
thank you so much,
That's
Rena.
good. Thank you. Thank you. Good to
So
be here.
stick around. You can
I
head
will.
on over to the Discord channel.
Okay.
Feel free to put your name down for the prize draws and chat with anybody who's there in the Discord, and hopefully we'll have some more time to chat at the end.
All right. Thank you so much.
So next up, we have Christina Ogle. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name right, Christy.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And Christy's story in issue 26 was the Water Shakers, and I'm just going to let her read because it's just, I don't want to say too much about it, but it is it's a story that really captivated us. So take it away, Christy.
Okay, I'll read first couple of pages. Mom screamed at me to do something about the horse trough. When I went out there, the mosquito larva's herky-jerky dance hypnotized me. Algae, seed pods, and grass floated on the surface. I considered pouring in some bleach, but that's no good for horses. I imagined Suck starting a hose, imagined the horses dancing around all joyous to have clean water. The idea of sucking that water grossed me out, though, and I didn't see a hose right away, and then I got distracted. The horses don't mind running down to the creek if they get thirsty anyway. By the time I came around again, the water was low and dark. I thought, I really do have to do something about this. The larvae were doing more of a belly dance now, sinuous hip shakes instead of the jerk. I lifted out a handful of water and saw 3 little transparent women rolling their hips in my palm. I just about screamed. Even as I held them, 2 slowed and stopped moving, but the center one kept on. She was clear like mineral jelly, her skeleton built like a human's, but made of silver wire, her pale organs more or less like ours, as far as I knew. A jelly head, but no face, no skull, a little pink brain floating on its stem. I dropped her in a big tumbler of water on my nightstand. She stood and moved her hips in swift circles again. I watched too long. When I returned, Mom had managed to tip over the trough, and I cried seeing what all was scattered on the ground. The one in my water glass seemed to be all right, though. She twitched and twitched her imaginary hula hoop all that night. I woke up several times to flick on the lamp and check her. I knew she needed food because she was moving more and more slowly each time, and by morning she jerked barely at all. I guess they'd been eating algae and leaves, but every pet I'd had has loved raw hamburger, so that's what I tried. I impaled a ball of meat on a toothpick and lowered it down to her. The blood aura wafted around her head, which stretched up to meet it. I imagined what would happen. The dimple in the top of her head would deepen to engulf the meat and suck it into a throat that opened above her collarbone. I didn't get to stay and watch. I had chores, school. When I returned, she'd grown an inch and shook at full speed. I thought she must be happy. She was half as tall as a Barbie when I got to thinking how her skeleton wasn't all the way finished, how she had no skull. Maybe there was some deficiency. Minerals? I took the tumbler to the trough, and she leaped out and swam to the rusted edge. Her head opened and took in a large flake of metal. She came back to the tumbler and shook her hips like, okay, let's go home. After that, I fed her screws and staples along with the hamburger, which really helped. Her skeleton grew sturdier, and a little chrome skull began to grow. I watched it form as much as I could since I was busy with school and chores. It started as thin as a spider's web, like a fine-line pencil sketch. Day by day, the lines grew wider, until one day she had a perfect skull with perfect little silver teeth. It had all the cool of a heavy metal album cover. The clear jelly outside the skull formed a present profile, too. Upturned nose, sharp chin. She would have been pretty if she'd had skin.
That's great, Christy. And if you want to read the rest of that story and find out what happens to that little water shaker, you can pick up issue 26. So tell me, what was your inspiration for that?
Honestly, just thinking about mosquitoes and the way that they move in the water.
Yeah, that sort of twitchy, that twitchy jerk. Yes. And by the way, when Christy emailed me back, she said, I can read if you like, but I have an annoying voice, and I don't think your voice is annoying at all. I think your reading was quite delightful, so
Thank you so much.
I think you should be easier on yourself. Your voice is just fine the way it is. So thank you so much for reading. I really enjoyed that.
Nice to meet you.
We have coming up our feature author for this issue. Well, we've got the issues on stage already, but Matthew Hughes was our feature author with Kaslow's story, which is The Bicolor Spiral. And he's also going to read a bit from the novel we published late last year, What the Wind Brings. I don't know which one he's going to read from first. I forgot to ask him that. So let's just bring Matt on stage and we'll ask him.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
So which one of these would you like to read from first?
I thought I would do the Bicolor Spiral first.
Oh, that's delightful. So I'll give a little introduction to this. So this one is a Sam Spade in space is kind of how I think of it. Caslow you might have come across in other stories of Matt's. And it's a nice fusion of crime, hard-boiled crime fiction and science fiction, which makes it perfect for our magazine. So let me hand it on over to you, Matt.
Okay. Yeah, this is a character called Caslow, and I cannot do a Humphrey Bogart imitation, but when you're hearing I'd like you to think you're hearing Humphrey Bogart as Sam Spade. You know, Maltese Falcon kind of guy. Okay? And this is how it begins. The young woman was nervous, wringing her soft cap between two pale hands, her gaze moving from place to place in Caslow's workroom because she was unable, or at least not yet ready, to meet the confidential operative's assessing stare. "Sit down," Caslow said. "Take a breath. I haven't bitten anybody in ages." The remark did not win him a smile. The visitor lowered herself into a chair, then scooted forward until her narrow buttocks were perched on the edge of the cushion. "It's a comfy chair," the op said, taking a position on the corner of his work table and adopting what was meant to be a reassuring tone. "People who come to see me professionally are often under considerable strain. I try to encourage them to relax." The young woman looked up at him, then quickly away. Her hands continued to worry the hat. "A mug of punch," Caslow said, "or a drop of something stronger." A sharp shake of the head caused a lock of lank blonde hair to fall in her face. She brushed it aside and went back to work on the cap. Caslow suppressed a sigh. He said, "How about we start with you telling me your name?" It took 2 attempts, the first strangled by a dry throat. Finally, the young woman managed to say, "Cundlemas, Purindeth Cundlemas." Caslow's encouraging expression did not change, but he recognized the name. Murderers were rare on the long-settled world of Novo Bantry, even here in its capital, which called itself the City of the Crystal Towers, though its more prosaic name was the Commune of Indobiria. "And why have you come to consult me?" he said, though he knew the answer. The cap took more punishment. Caslow changed tack. "It's because the Provost Department intends to arrest you for the murder of your uncle. They're just waiting for the warrant to arrive from, where is it again?" The already pale face before him had now gone ashen. Cundlemas half rose from a chair, her eyes wide and panicky now, her head turning to make sure she knew where the door was. The op slid off the desk and laid a firm but gentle hand on the woman's shoulder, which trembled like some small and defenseless creature that knows it's being hunted. "It's all right," Caslow said. "You've come to the right place. They won't arrest you if you engage me." "Is that really true?" said Cundlemas, a faint light of hope diluting the fear in her face. "I mean, I'd heard, but I didn't know." "Well, how would you? You've never been accused of a crime before, have you?" Caslow didn't need to ask. The look of the potential client told him all he needed to know. Crime was rare on Novo Bantry, where life was easy and the human mind well ordered. Passion seldom boiled over, and in the rare incidences when emotions ran amok, the cause could usually be traced to a malfunctioning of the brain resulting from physiological disorder or overindulgence in powerful stimulants. Purindeth Cundlemas showed no signs of either. She looked like a young woman whose hitherto smooth voyage across the ocean of enjoyable existence had suddenly been wrecked on uncharted rocks. Caslow patted the air in a quieting gesture and said, "If you engage me, and I accept the assignment, I will stand surety for you until your case is heard by the arbiters. You will not be confined, and I will be responsible for you." Cundlemas settled back into the chair, blinking and nodding as she took this in. Then Caslow saw the fear come back. "I don't know," the young woman said, "if I can afford you." "Your uncle was a wealthy man," the op said. "You are his sole heir. If what the provost department says is accurate, you should have no trouble paying my fee. If I am convicted, I cannot inherit it. It will all go to the commune. All the more reason I should work hard in your behalf. He went to the confectionery and had it generate 2 mugs of hot steaming punch. He gave one to Candlemas, who let her cap fall into her lap. Her hands had lost the worst of their tremors. The op sat in his work chair and took a sip of the brew, and then said, "Now, take a good long drink, then tell me what you know." And there we are.
Wonderful. And to find out what Kaslow finds out, you can read the rest of that in the Bicolor Spiral in issue 26.
And to find out what a bicolor spiral is.
Yes.
And why people want it. Yeah.
And of course, being crime fiction, why people are willing to kill for it.
Yes. Can I mention something?
Sure.
I like I originally created him for a novel called A Wizard's Henchman, in which he is a Sam Spade who takes up with a man he thinks is insane because the man thinks he's going to be a wizard in a space opera setting. But what the man knows and doesn't is that the whole universe is about to change its operating system and be based on magic instead of cause and effect. But after I'd written that novel and it was published, I thought was worth developing and doing back in his career when he was, Sam Spade with spaceships. So I've written a series of stories, and I've also started to work him in as a supporting character into the novel I'm working on right now, which brings people from another novel of mine from years ago, the protagonists of the novel Template, which was also a space opera novel. So I'm 45,000 words into that now, and expect to get it done sometime before the end of the spring. And then I go back to work on a sequel to Jack Vance's The Demon Prince's quintilogy. Busy, even though I'm confined to a basement in Saanich.
Well, I think being confined to a basement is a good way to be very busy as a writer.
Not
well, that's
much else
pretty
to do.
exciting. That's exciting that you've got more of the Wizard's Henchman stuff coming out. And I guess the Demon Prince one is you finished that and then you're waiting to do a second draft on it. Is that right?
I've done 58,000 words, and it needs to be a little longer, so I'm probably going to do a subplot involving the main villain in the piece, bring him on stage earlier, and from his point of view, because he's an interesting villain. He's a space pirate, you might say. I've got George R.R. Martin champing at the bit, waiting to get his advanced reading copy of it, so he can enjoy himself in his mountain fastness, where he's isolated. He's a big fan of Jack Vance, and he considers me to be the guy who's carrying on the Vance tradition.
Yes, well, I mean, he has called you criminally underrated, so I think he
True.
thinks quite highly of you.
Yes.
As long as it doesn't distract him too much from finishing his own book, which everybody is hoping he does.
He told me in an email a few days ago he's writing away, working, as I do in fact, on WordStar on a DOS-based computer.
Wow.
Another thing we have in common, yeah. Well, Robert J. Sawyer, the science fiction author, who's also been one of yours, he also writes in WordStar. Yeah. All the cool people do.
So it's writers of a certain vintage, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a wonderful
If it works,
program.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it as a word processing program. It's in many ways much less annoying than Word.
Yes, it does everything you want it to do and nothing you don't.
Yes, that is important. So now, taking a turn of tone and a turn of genre, will you give us a little bit of what the wind brings and tell us a bit about it? to introduce it.
Yeah, well, there is a tale to tell. Round about 1971, I came across a footnote in a textbook in university. It was a book about cross-cultural clashes and assonances where different cultures found themselves suddenly thrown together. And the piece that I was reading said that it generally happened that castaways, like, Japanese fishermen getting blown ashore on Nootka Sound 500 years ago, they normally didn't do very well. But there was one exception, and that was a shipload of African slaves who were wrecked on the jungle coast of Ecuador in the middle of the 1500s. And they flourished. So I thought to myself, all those years ago, that would make a pretty good historical novel. And over the years, I did my best to research it, which was difficult because most of the scholarship was in South American academic journals, and I'm not that good at Spanish that I can read academic prose. But in this century, North American scholars began to write about it in English, so I could actually do more research. And when I figured I had enough to make a go of it, I applied to the Canada Council, and they very kindly gave me $25,000, and I wrote the book. And then you published it.
And we're very glad we did.
Yeah, not as glad as I was. Oh, yeah. Anyway, it's based on true story, and there is a great deal of verisimilitude in it, but there's also characters that I created because it needed to be a story, not a history. And this book opens with one of those characters, in fact, a key character, who is an indigenous person of the tribe of the Nigua, who lived in that part of Ecuador then, in the jungle. And she is a shaman, and I call her she because the people around her call her she, but she is in fact what we would today call intersex, but in those days they called a hermaphrodite. And she not only thinks she can do magical things, she actually can, because I am a fantasy writer as well as a historical novelist. So we begin from her point of view. I was in the spirit house, meditating on breath. The men of the village were in the men's house, where Petey had called a meeting to discuss something to do with the crops. The women were in the women's house, brewing corn beer and making jokes about each other's husbands, but keeping an eye on the men's house across the central open space. I did not go to the meeting. I was not a man. I did not go to where the women were gathered. I was not a woman. Besides, I knew that Petey would come to me in due time. He was staunch for the proper ways of doing things, despite all that had befallen us and the other towns of the Nigua Nation in the years since the Spaniards had passed through. I returned to my meditation. I had been thinking about breath a great deal lately. I knew what every shaman knew, that breath was life. Babies were born dead, warm and whole of body, but inanimate until they took their first breath and began to live. And the last thing the dying did was to stop breathing. So it was clear that breath going in or coming out was the key to the great secret. That was old wisdom. Under my predecessor Palu's tutelage, I had learned how to control my breathing, to channel and focus the life force so as to perform acts that were impossible for the untutored, unless they took the mushrooms called the openers, as the men did in some of their ceremonies. But the openers brought them only dreams, so sometimes those dreams could be of serious import, instead of truly opening the doors to the upper and lower worlds. I could climb or descend into the other realms without openers, simply by regulating my breathing while repeating the secret words that Palu had taught me after he took me into his keeping, after he prevented Manda, the father of Petey, from dashing my infant head against a rock because of my discrepancy. I had chosen today, the signs were auspicious, to meditate on the question of breath, sitting cross-legged in the spirit house with my back straight as Palo had taught me. I fixed my vision on the central post, the axis between the upper and lower worlds, and took charge of my breathing, slowing it gradually, until my abdomen and chest would scarcely have shown movement, if anyone could have been in the spirit house to see it. The interior of the house grew brighter, one of the signs that I was becoming detached from the middle world. The blond wood of the axis post began to glow with a golden light, telling me that I was nearing the threshold of the channel to the upper world. I reached without looking for the small wooden bowl and took 2 small sips of the clarifying tea, then set it down and continued to concentrate on my breathing. The tea began to work within me, opening the ways. I felt my pulse throbbing in the 7 parts of my body. My torso became a great hollow tube extending from my buttocks to the inside of my mouth, but I kept my lips tightly sealed to prevent my inner parts from rushing out. If I let them escape, I knew it would take a long time to recover them. Gradually the pressure ebbed away while the glow grew brighter and moved to envelop me until my view of the spirit house was completely suffused by the light, and I saw only gold with the usual rim of blackness at the edge of my vision. The old deceivers hissed and chattered at me from the darkness, but I had long since ceased to give them any heed. Motionless, I waited for the expanding light to absorb me completely. When I was sure I was surrounded by its warmth, I let a portion of my innermost self seep from one nostril and make contact. A lightness filled my chest, and I felt as if I could float up to the thatch above me, to fly out of the smoke hole and perch on the roof. It was a better perch than Petey's for listening in on gossip. But I resisted the urge and focused instead on calling the one who guarded and advised me. She came, as always, in the form of a monkey eagle, her feathers gray above and pale below, showing bands of light and darkness as she spread her wings and closed them. I offered my own courtesy and a greeting. She turned her head and looked at me from one golden eye. She did not speak, she never did. But I felt her presence within me and knew that she waited for me to begin the conversation. I spoke in my spirit voice that none but she would hear. I have been thinking about breath and life. The word mystery formed in my mind. Yes, I said, I wish to know it. A great mystery, said my own voice, so I knew it was speaking for her, woven through the world. Ah, I said, each connected to all connected to each. Consider the wind, my inner voice said, and what it brings. It was a thought that had already passed through my mind a number of times. The wind was like breath, but none knew where it came from or where it went. Did something breathe the wind? If so, whose breath was it, or did it breathe itself? These were old questions, never answered. But the guardian had spoken of what the wind brought, which was a new consideration, and now I said, what does it bring? The answer came not in words, but in a sudden sense of motion. I was rising up as if I were a monkey seized in eagle's claws, though I felt no pain, and I knew I would not be harmed. It was not the first time I had flown like this. We climbed through the leafy canopy, as I had often seen such birds fly in the forest, their short, powerful wings finding holes and pathways among the branches. Then we were out in the open air and still rising. Far off to the east I could see the forested hills climbing to the blue mountains, obscured today by overcast. To the west was the sea, as gray as the sky, the line where one met the other made invisible by rain. We passed over the ruined town the old chief, Manda, Petey's father, had led us away from in my childhood, when the spotted sickness came again. Then we flew on, out beyond the horizon, out to the deep sea where our men used to sail on balsa rafts, trading with towns 3 and 4 days' sail away, towns that were all gone now. We flew through the rain and out into sun again. The water turned blue, marked with snails' trails of currents. But now, farther out, I saw something I had never seen, though I recognized it from descriptions I had heard. It was a ship of the Spaniards, rounded at one end and squared off at the other, with tall posts from which great swatches of pale cloth hung motionless in a windless calm. Unlike a canoe, its hollow spaces were roofed over with wooden planks, and on them were the first Spaniards I had ever seen.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Matt. I just don't get tired of listening to you read that. And I don't get tired of hearing from expectation. I wish
No,
this was going to be a series so that we'd have more
people
of them.
really, people really like her
Yeah.
or them.
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen a number of comments in Amazon and so on. People say, "I wish I knew her." Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's she's one of those characters that you feel kind of helps you through the story. Like she's not just a guide to, Alonzo. She's a guide to the reader. And it is, yes, it's quite an achievement.
She's the one who sees clearly
Yes.
through all of this. Yes.
Yeah.
And has to make things work for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily to be understood that she's going to succeed. I mean, it's a challenge that she has because she's this little tiny, unusual person caught between worlds and doing her best, which is the kind of character I most like to write.
Do you think there'd ever be a chance for an Expectations spin-off? Because there's quite a long stretch of time between, the sort of the end of the story and the full end of the book. The
Yes,
side adventures of Expectation.
it does span about 20 years.
Yeah.
The novel. I will confess I have not given it any thought. I think of this book as a rounded whole, and I did wait 40 years and more to write it, so it had a completeness when I was done. But yeah, I could see doing not another novel, but I could see doing a story about her. She would be worth doing. And her fascination with things that have nothing to do with Africans or Spaniards. She was very interested in science as she understood it from a shamanistic point of view. She wanted to know what breath was and why when you blow on your hands to warm them, you also blow on your soup to cool it. That really confused her and she wanted to investigate it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love the way her mind works. So Susan Peters says, great character, Matt. Brenda Carr says, welcome to North Saanich, and that was so good. Thank you, Matt. And I've got some earlier comments from the previous stories. For Christy, Jessica was asking, any inspiration from sea monkeys or those grow your own dinosaur eggs you drop in the water? So Christy, if you're still hanging around, maybe you can answer that in the Discord chat or come back on to stage 10 and answer that in person. MFC Feely said, love that about the water shakers. And Krista Wallace, who is an actor and performer, wants you to know that everyone's voice sounds weird to themselves, and I agree. I hate the sound of my own voice too. And Jessica says your voice is lovely. So thank you again, Matt, for that reading. Let's check in with Melissa. How are you doing, Melissa?
I'm doing fine. This is so enjoyable. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh,
Can you hear
well,
me?
thank you for painting for us, giving us something to follow along here. This is just marvelous. I can't wait to see this painting when it's done.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. I'm working on trying to flesh out her jewelry. Her jewelry will be made of, I imagine these as carved bone or ivory tiles. It's an earring that runs down from her ear, and they're plackets of little faces to represent the ghosts of dead children.
Oh, wow. Gruesome, but also lovely.
Yes, well, I actually think she's, somebody has to take care of the dead children in the land of the of the in-between, in the other world. I think it might have been a great comfort to mothers to know that, when childbirth was often ended in child death, as well as death for the mother. But it might have been a great comfort for a living mother to know that her child was going to be taken care of by this paragon of domesticity, who was also called the Shining One.
I have a question from the audience. Somebody wants to know who was your model? Do you have a model for
Nobody.
this one? Nobody.
No, I just out of my head.
Okay.
Sometimes I use models. No one is safe on a bus ride or the doctor's office or. I love looking at people's faces, and I find people endlessly inspiring.
And Graham Darling's asking, what's the medium?
It's watercolor. I know it's odd that I'm working so vertically with watercolor, but I have a really bad back, so working bent over at the normal angle most watercolors are done is not a happening thing for me. So I work vertically, which means I work quite dryly. Not a lot of wet and wet washes, or if I do them, they have to be very, very controlled. Otherwise, they easily run out of hand.
All right. Well, we're still having problems getting Mel back on. She was here, but we don't have her video feed. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read a section of Aria, and then hopefully Mel and our director can work together and get us going again. So, as I was saying, this is my second novel. The first novel, Alenia's Song Overture, there it is available from Pulp Literature Press and Amazon, and any bookstore can order it in. And the same with this one. So this was just released this week. The box of books came through Purolator earlier in the week. And we do still have a special on until the end of today. If you buy this book, we will give a copy of the first book, Overture, to a friend or family member. So if you've read the first one and would like to share the love, we will send a digital copy. We aren't giving away print copies, but whether you buy the print or the digital version of the second book, we will give a digital copy to a friend, family member, anyone you choose. All you need to do is email us, info@pulpliterature.com. If you've bought it through us, we will be able to verify that purchase. That's no problem. If you bought it through a third-party retailer like Amazon, something like that, just send us a copy of the proof of purchase or something like that, just a screenshot showing that you did purchase that, because we don't get that information from Amazon. So that's our way of trying to share the love, help read with family and friends even though you're far away. If the family or friend has already read the first book, we're happy to give them a copy of the second book as well. 2-for-1 deal. So Alenia's Song is a buildings roman. It's a story of a young woman. Covers her in the first book from the time she's a very small girl up until 14. And at the end of that book, I'm not giving too much away. It's not too much of a spoiler if you haven't read it. She does run away from home. She gets very annoyed with her parents and her family for lying to her all her life about her parentage. And then she's also been promised to another local lord, and she will have none of that. So she's just taking matters into her own hand. She stole off in the middle of the night with nothing but her saddlebags, a few days' worth of provisions, her bow, her sword, and her father's dagger. This part I'm going to read takes place a little ways into the book. She's been on the road a while. She's made a couple of friends. She has a couple of hangers-on named Dog and Radek, and she has gone off into town with... And of course, my daughters decide to let the dog into the room right when I say dog. And there we go. If you hear any growling in the background, that is just, extra sound effects. He's attacking his hedgehog. So, verse 6, the Bard's Bale. The sun was unseasonably bright and cheerful, I thought, given my mood. I couldn't fathom what had possessed my self-appointed Squire Radek, despite the 1.5 eagles' worth of small coins I'd given him to complete his shopping errands, to attempt instead to steal a leg of cured mutton hanging from a butcher's stall. I learned the reason later. It was his pressing sense of obligation to me, his desire to save me a few coins and lessen the burden he made on my purse. Of course, he was already in the stocks by the time I spotted the commotion across the market square and pressed my laden way through the crowd. All of his purchases and his purse had been confiscated by the guard, and, after I bought Radek's freedom, I had further negotiating to do to release his possessions. They were lighter by at least 1/3 than they ought to have been, but I had no way of proving it. I loaded him up with my shopping as well, and sent him shamefaced from my scolding back to where Dog camped a league outside town. The reason we had separated in the first place was so I could buy new underclothes, and that task was still unfinished. I set off, head down, grumbling at the inconvenience and cost of being liege to even one dim lad. I had only made 50 disgruntled paces when a large firm hand settled itself on my shoulder. "Hold up there a bit, lad." I came to a slow stop and gave an even slower quarter turn of the head, just enough to see my interlocutor. It was one of the city watch, not the thick-jawed clerk or the hoary veteran I'd dealt with for Radek's release, but the one who'd been sitting at the back of the guard-room, whetting and oiling his sword. Some rusty instinct began screaming at me to run, but I didn't pull back from the hand, which I felt would only tighten if I did. I simply stood, knees bent, weight on my toes to see how this new development would hinder me. He walked across in front of me, that enormous hand never letting go of my shoulder, as if in some strange madrigal. He held me at arm's length, studying both me and a sheet of parchment in his other hand. "Nayland, is it?" he asked. It was the name I'd used to sign Radek's release, but it was also the name so foolishly close to my own that I'd given at Donahue's camp. He must have felt the involuntary quiver that ran through me, for his grip tightened. "You'll have to come back to the guardhouse with me," he said, not unkindly. My feet were glued to the cobbles, resisting the gentle pull on my shoulder. "Not to fear, lad," he encouraged. "Simple misunderstanding. You'll not be punished." Fear warred with curiosity. What could that parchment say, and what did it reveal about me? With practice born of many sibling battles, I dropped down out of his grasp and twisted up again, snatching the parchment from his other hand as I hurtled off across the public square. The twisting motion I'd used to reach the parchment had sent a twinge of pain through my knee, not to mention costing me a heartbeat of time. Sometimes I still wonder what difference that fraction of a second might have made. As it was, I only just missed escaping down an alley as a drover backed his oxen into it. I tried anyway, hitting the cobbles with my already sore knee and scrabbling like a lizard between the cart's moving wheels. I was almost home free when that large muscled hand clamped down on me again, this time on my ankle, and pulled me out like a load of washing against the washboard cobbles, not nearly so gentle this time around. "I said, lad," he puffed, once he'd pulled me upright by the collar, "your master don't plan to punish ye, but make me run like that again and I might do it for him." And now I think we finally have Mel on stage. And let's bring Mel over. Hi,
Hello
Mel.
there. Hi. Oh, I love that story. These have all
Oh,
been such
thank you.
amazing stories that I remember so well. Terrific. Absolutely terrific.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm excited because you're going to read some Frankie. And I don't think we've ever had you read Frankie at a launch.
Maybe not. Oh,
So we often, most of you who come to our launches know that Mel's the author of the Stella Ryman and the Fairmount Manor Mysteries series. But she also writes The Extra, which is an entirely different mystery series set in 1930s Hollywood, and we are hoping to publish that later this year. And in fact, my daughter is working on a cover for it right now, which the reveal will come in time, and I
the
am
hints I've
excited to
seen
hear.
are pretty exciting.
It is pretty nice, and your drawings for it are beautiful. I mean, just look at those palm trees and searchlights there.
Thank you. That's lovely to hear. Yeah, I had a great time writing Frankie. Of course, being a schoolmarm myself, and always wanted to run away to Hollywood, but I really kind of wanted to run away to Hollywood in 1934. So I wrote the book about it instead. And being a mystery writer, it had to be a mystery. So when we pick up Frankie in issue 26, she's managed to get herself involved with some very dangerous people who are most powerful and incredibly ambitious. And there's this gun, a very businesslike gun that keeps turning up and sometimes shooting, and different hands that should not have a gun in their hands at all. And she's managed with her friend Connie Mooney, the beautiful and talented one. They have managed to get themselves a bungalow on Sunset Boulevard and a job as an extra, which she can't even believe it because 2 weeks before she was an engaged girl and a substitute teacher in Vancouver, BC. So, if they can be ready to go, they start as extras today, and Frankie's outside dry stockings when the enigmatic next door neighbor calls her over to show her what he's found in their shared backyard, which was a dead body that appeared to have been buried without a funeral. Eugene Ellery. Eugene rose to his feet. He looked down at his palms and then shoved his hands deep into his pockets. Let us not give in to emotion. I'll do what I want, Frankie answered. She closed her eyes. She hardly knew what she was saying. My father says that if emotions made sense, we wouldn't need them. Logic would see us through every circumstance. We leave in 4 minutes. Connie's voice sounded more urgent than ever. Frankie felt a warm breath against her cheek. She opened her eyes to see Eugene Ellery's face up very close to her own. His gray eyes showed pink at the inside edges. Go, he said. Join the others at your 9 o'clock call. I'm sorry I've upset you. So you've been my witness, my insurance now that I can call the local police. You may have to give them a statement. Yes, though I hardly know what I'd say. Aren't you going to... She gestured to the patch of uncovered flesh, the corpse's white hands with their dirty knuckles. Aren't you going to uncover him? Him? She nodded. The hairs on a woman's fingers would be softer. Him, then. Eugene Ellery helped Frankie to her feet. Well, there's no sense in uncovering him. We'll let the local police handle it. Poor fellow. But if he's buried in your backyard... She couldn't finish without asking whether he was the one who buried the body, but then why would he dig up a dead man again? You'd have to be insane to do such a thing. And there was one thing she knew. Eugene Ellery was not crazy. Our shared backyard, he reminded her. He untied his white silk ascot from around his neck and wiped their hands clean, first hers, and then his. She asked, Who do you think this was? He crushed the silk in his jacket pocket. It's bound to be somebody's old aunt. Uncle, she corrected him. Somebody's old uncle then who died, and there was no money set aside for the funeral. It happens a lot in common spaces these days, although usually they bury them deeper. So he's buried in the yard like a dog, Frankie said. People love their dogs, Eugene pointed out. Look, I don't need to give you any more nightmares about shovels. We'll leave him covered. Go do what you were going to do. I don't know if I can. Frankie took a deep breath. I don't know if I can drive at all right now. I'll wait with you for the police. Well, didn't they tell you I am the police? Eugene Ellery made the sort of gesture that accompanied, in Frankie's experience, a person's reluctance to explain things she wanted to know. I'm a policeman, he said, not from around here, though. This is not my jurisdiction. Still, now I've seen the body, I can call out the local coppers. Connie called out through the back door, Frankie, if you're not ready, the extras will leave without us. Was it wrong to leave the body here? To go off like a snap of busy fingers to be a Hollywood extra, caring about nothing but herself? Frankie would have liked to ask the dead man what he thought. She would say, Excuse me, sir, this is an important day for me, but I guess I could say the same for you. Would you like me to stay? I'll give up my first day as an extra in the movies if you need me to. She tried to imagine how it would be to lie dead in the grass and the dirt while a young woman with all her life ahead of her asked that question. She could not. All she knew was she owed the dead man something. Frankie put out her hand and touched the 3 pale fingers. They were cool, not cold. They were much the same temperature as the cool morning air. Shivering, she forced herself to leave her fingers on his for another moment. I'm sorry you had to die, sir, she said. I don't know what to do right now to show my respect. Should I wait right here with you and Eugene? It was hard to put oneself into a dead man's shoes. She closed her eyes and waited for an answer. And when a moment later the answer came, she did not feel any sort of ghostly spookiness, nor any sort of warning. The words simply came to her from inside herself. You owe me nothing. One person waiting at my side is company enough on a sunny morning. And with that, Frankie heads off to her first day at the studios, at Monument Studios. And this meeting with the dead person is going to have first an amazing repercussion and then a pretty terrifying one.
Yeah, it's quite a first day at the studio there.
Yeah.
And you can read all about it in issue 26. Thanks for that, Mel. That was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
I
Thank you very
love
much
hearing
for letting me
Frankie.
read.
So I just want to remind everyone that the silent auction closes in 8 minutes. Get your bids in now if there's something you've been waiting on. We're going to check in again with Melissa, see how that painting's coming along.
Hello.
Oh,
You're
I
back.
can see those earrings quite clearly now.
Oh, good. Oh, good. And I've got paintbrushes flying all over the studio because I just knocked my paintbrushes with my elbow.
Oh, I love it when that happens. It's
I mean,
better
if you
than
think the
knocking
camera is very interesting.
your paint water, though.
That's true. I actually keep it quite separated, or drinking it, which I
I confess I've done that.
yeah.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us. If we have any of the authors still backstage, we can bring them up on split screen if anybody's still live back there. I think this worked fairly well for our first time doing a virtual launch. I mean, there were some technical difficulties, but the readings that we managed to get going all sounded wonderful to me. So thank you, everybody, and cheers and happy reading.